Not good.
Okay, I think we can start, Mark.
Okay. So we'll call the November 23rd, 2020 work session to order. It's 5:34 p.m. And I think the agenda item tonight is the looking at the facilities, long-range facility plan. So, Mr. Parker.
Perfect. I just got a text from Narce. It says I logged in via the Forest Grove web link. So I think she's, I don't know, Enrique, if you can give her a call, we could, but she's having some kind of difficulty. Okay. First, before we get going very far, let me just formally introduce our student representative, Miley Vernon, is here along with Bobby Kirkman attending, and Miley will have some information for us coming in on at the real board meeting, but just wanted to make sure I introduced her and welcomed her. We're excited to have her, so yay. Next, I want to talk a little bit about, let me share my screen here. On October 23rd, we did a work session where we sat down to start talking about long-range facility planning and some of the assumptions that we need to be able to run that committee. And so we've done some work on that night. You asked some questions, and we're bringing back those recommendations one more time to get kind of the thumbs up that yes, these are good assumptions for us to work. And I want to start by saying, because I created a little confusion out in the organization, and I just want to make sure we're clear what we're doing here. What we're going to talk about today is really we're trying to provide this committee with some assumptions of what we think right now. We're not making any decisions. So some of the things that we're talking about here, these are all things that you may want to make a decision about somewhere down the road. Tonight, all we're trying to do is say, right now, right here, this is our best thinking for what we might do somewhere down the road. But there is no decisions here. Like some of the things with us talking about PE minutes and staffing, those are all things that we're going to decide and talk more about. There's a real decision there for the board to make. Tonight, all we're trying to do is give this long-range facility committee the best information we can with where we might go. So that's all we're talking about tonight, is kind of these assumptions that we want folks to be able to work with. So at the end, what I thought we would do is we'll roll through each of these, take questions, that kind of thing. And what I really need is just kind of, it's not a vote that you'll take because we're not deciding this, but what I'm hoping for is kind of a consensus that, okay, we're at a good spot. We're at a good place with this assumption. We'll pass it on to the facility committee, and then we'll kind of go from there. Questions about kind of where we're at and what this is. Perfect. So the first one I want to talk a little bit about is, so the purpose of this data is to provide the guiding principles and update our 2017 plan. That's the last one we made. It should be based on kind of what is the potential in the next 10 years or so, but there's a lot of things changing with that. Max elementary size. So one of the questions that we came up with here was, so what size should we build? Our conversation was we want to build smaller elementaries. We went out and kind of what we did is look at number one, what size of schools is everybody else building? So on the right-hand side here, you've got kind of the comparables. HSD, their last two elementaries they built were 600, LeGrand 500, Forest Grove, Joseph Gale, the last one we built was 550. Bethel School District, you can kind of see the other places. You also see the other findings there, which is kind of new. The new Beaverton schools are all 750. McMinnville's 467. That's in current enrollment. And so we kind of came back to this because I don't think we disagree that we want to have smaller elementary schools. What we're going to recommend, though, is that we build them for about 500 to 550. And here's why. Just when we're building schools, when we dip a bucket, when the contractors come out and they start digging earth, the cost of that is extreme. And for us to build let's say two 300 student elementaries, the cost of that versus building one 600 student elementary is so large that it doesn't make financial sense not for us to use the economies of scale. Now, we can place a decision that we get to make is how many kids we put in that school. But what we're suggesting is if we start saying that we're going to build in our planning, so this is all meant for planning, but if we're going to build 350 student schools to cover, we're going to end up spending a lot more money. So this is our recommendation that we came up with is comparable districts, resources available for teachers, schools that are smaller than about 350 to 400. We start running into problems with number one, there aren't enough teachers per grade level. So the class sizes get wonky, supports. You can see all of the reasonings there that we have there, the building gyms and offices and the rest of it. So in this first one, what we're recommending is for the max elementary size is about 500 to about 550. That would be what we would have this committee use. Now, with that, I'll open it up to some questions or discussion. And we've got other folks on the line tonight who can also provide background if you have questions.
Hi, Dave. I guess one of the things when we were looking at that, we were looking at the same, I mean, I was on that first committee, the same kind of principles that you have listed here. I guess the difference is, as a parent, where would you want to send your kid? And it was been pretty clear in our district for the last at least 20 years that most of the parents want to send their children to a smaller elementary school. So that would be my only comment. And that's the reason I made the comment last time about a smaller than 500. You typically see parents wanting to send their children, if they have a choice, to a smaller elementary school, which in my mind makes sense. I know what the issues are in terms of finance and the money, and I know staffing issues. I understand that. My comment was really around what do parents and stakeholders really want for their kids in Forest Grove School District?
Thank you.
Dave, I agree with Brad. I also would like to add is that the projections from Portland State on enrollment going out, that has to tie into this. And I think that we need to have a different kind of vision for our elementary schools and any school that we build, that we need to think outside the box. We can't be thinking the way the schools have been in the past. We really need to look at what are other schools innovatively doing. And your comment about a larger building accommodating 500, 550 students, that we don't necessarily have to have that many students. We could utilize maybe the building in a different way, but I think that we need to look at how some innovative schools in the future and how are they being used, because the needs of our kids are really different. And it's as we've seen with COVID and using technology in that. So that would be my comment.
I don't have any argument with that. And what I would tell you is that as we get to the actual facility planning committee, and as we begin to look at what our needs are, because they'll use these numbers to determine, do we have enough classrooms, that kind of thing, and do we have a need? Absolutely. I think there's an opportunity for us to begin to talk about how do we do this differently.
I would
Go
just
ahead, Mark.
wonder, Dave, what the, I don't know the cost in building, is it double to build, say, let's say 350 student schools? Is that, you know what I mean? I don't know what kind of cost difference you're talking about. I know it's more. Is it?
Yeah, I don't think it's double.
Okay.
And I don't have actual numbers,
Right.
but what I do know is that the cost of building 350 student schools is significantly more than
Yeah.
building one, even 600 if we wanted to equate them. But again, I think Brad's point is, I mean, I think people understand the economies of scale stuff here. The question is, how do we continue to kind of keep these schools not at their maximums, but allow, and again, just even where we're starting to get with in some of our schools where like every classroom is used now, so we have to move specialists out. So having space in these schools is not a bad thing. I think what I heard you saying is, again, trying to manage those populations so that they're not all at 500, 550, that kind of thing. I get that.
Dave, I would have a question along Mark's question, like how much, what are we talking about in terms of, rough numbers? Not, I mean, I understand that things fluctuate, but I know when we met last time, however long ago it was, they had kind of rough numbers per square footage and number of kids, and they even had the classroom sizes and can run numbers. It would be interesting to see what the cost difference would be for a smaller school, say, even a compromise, say 400 instead of 550, or
Right.
What the numbers look like.
I think we can actually probably find that just from some historical data. I mean, there have been lots of schools built here in the last little bit here. So we'll try and put that together and send it out to you in the Friday memo.
And I would also echo a little bit of what Kate said. I don't know, I don't know what kind of different models are out there for elementary education in terms of how to educate elementary kids, maybe differently outside of the box. And so I don't know what that looks like, but it would be interesting to have some information maybe about what might be called innovative elementary schools that are in Oregon and how they do it differently.
Dave, is this information, all these buildings, I know I'm familiar with some of those buildings that listed here. Are they the same contractor and architect?
My guess would be no, but Eileen will probably need to, Eileen grabbed this data, so she should probably weigh in here, but I'm pretty positive no.
So Dave, I have another question is, I know that the facilities group will meet, and this is just talking about elementary school. So I might be jumping the gun here, but, we have, to look at all of the facilities and needs of our community, including, the Gales Creek School and also those students at that school. What are their needs? How do we meet those needs effectively? And is that site the best site for those kids? And what about the future of Gales Creek School? Do we want to do a STEM school or like an outdoor school? So that might be down the road, but that's another comment.
Thank you. That would be down the road. Tonight, all I'm trying to do is get to some general assumptions because of the committee's going to need these numbers so that they can start to do the comparison to figure out what kind of capacity do we have. That's the whole point of tonight. I know it's so hard to kind of roll around that, but the basic gist is this. So what I hear, because of we got to give a number to this group to begin to work with. So what I hear you saying is that you're more comfortable somewhere in the 400 to 500 range. I don't know if I can move off of 500. I can see how you don't want to be at 550, but it's a building schools for 350 does not make money sense. And I guess I need to prove that to you, but.
Yeah, I want to see the numbers. Not that I don't believe you, Dave.
Yeah.
I understand it. So
Brad, I can get that for you. We'll have it in the Friday memo.
Thanks, Lainey.
Okay,
Dave, I have a question.
yep.
Good afternoon. This is Narce. My question is, based on this future thinking for the elementary school, do we know what the demographic of the children's will be? Because I assume this would be in the Forest Grove area, correct?
So that's not what we're doing today.
So what-
All of that will actually come out once we start doing the planning, and they'll use these numbers to figure out what kind of capacity we have in the district. And then at that point, we'll start looking at the need. And then we'll start thinking about, like, where should this go? The only thing that we're working today is what should the size of our schools be? And then we'll use that number. The architects will use it to compare how much room we have in the district, how many new classrooms we need to build. And from there, we can start figuring out those pieces. But I don't know that demographics yet because we don't know what the need is.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't think I'm going to get some consensus on this one. So we're going to move it forward and we'll get to some consensus. What I think everyone, what I hear from folks is, again, you understand why we're recommending 500 to 550. You'd like to see some numbers. You'd still like to see that lower. Is that a consensus we can? Okay, I see nodding. Okay. Target class size. So what we did here is we tried to look at, and again, what we're going to use this target class size for is they're going to use this to determine how many classrooms we have, how many classrooms we need. That's the only thing we put on here. This comes from a table that you guys saw probably 2 years ago that we put out in front of folks. And you'll see the fourth column over is 2017 long range facility plan. These were the numbers we used to calculate whether or not how many classrooms we need. And we use 25, 25, 30, and 30. QEM, the next in the third column there, you can see where QEM is. This is the recommendations by the quality education model. And then the second column here is where we're currently at with our SSA funding, because we had some FTE wrapped up into that. And what you can see is K4, we're 23.5 right now, K4. Now remember, the only numbers they're looking for are the average here, because we know that we have some classrooms that are smaller, we have some classrooms that are larger, but they just need a simple ratio that they're going to utilize to figure out how many classrooms we need. Currently, we're at 23.5, 5, 6, we're at 27 with the added SSA dollars. 7 and 8, we're at 30 and 32.5, but remember, that's the actual. You're actually funding those schools. I think 7, 8 is somewhere around 24 to 1, and the high school is somewhere around 24 to 1 is what you're actually funding them at, because the teachers have preps, that kind of thing. So our recommendations is in the last column. We still believe that there's some work for us to do at K4, and that's the average across the whole thing. And the other thing we thought about when we're doing this is that we're coming into a period where we could have some significant, we've already heard what the budget forecasts are. So we're not anticipating that education's going to get a lot more money. So what we've done here is we've pretty much stayed pretty close to what we think is possible. So we're recommending K4 at 23 to 1. So they would use that number to determine how many classrooms we have, how many classrooms we need. We're recommending 25 to 1 at 5, 6. We've all recognized that there's still work to be done at case in the 5, 6. They were at 29 to 1 last year. We did a little bit of work on them this year. And then we're just recommending that we stay at the same basic, using the same basic ratio to determine capacity at the high school. So with that, I'm going to open it up to some conversation. Are we in agreement? Does that sound logical? Okay,
It sounds logical to me, Dave, but I'm the newbie on the team.
yeah.
I think those are reasonable numbers, Dave.
Now, I know we have had some conversations about like K1 and 2, about maybe doing some work where we do make a decision about where our aims are. That's still possible. It just feels like we just need this basic number for them to be able to move forward on.
If that's your average, then you could have your 3-4s up at a higher level and your K1-2s at a lower level. I think that at some point you start to make plans about building a facility. I think that's that's probably a good middle number to use.
Okay, I'm going to take my win while I got it. So let's move on to the next one.
Run, Dave, run.
Grade configuration. Now I want to explain this recommendation because I know when we talked about it, and this is this idea of K4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. We got into this conversation last time, but here's what I'm recommending for the long range facility plan. I heard from all of you that there's a conversation to be had here, that maybe this is something we need to talk about. In the recommendation for the long range facility plan, what I'm going to say is that, number one, whatever, to get into that conversation and actually do it is going to take years. That's a complete all new boundaries. That's a complete deal. I don't think, for the purposes of this long range facility plan, what I'm going to recommend is that we say to this group, we're going to maintain the current configuration because of it's so up in the air. If I tell them, no, we're going to have a new configuration, but we don't have any idea what that is or how that's going to, all I'm saying is for this committee to just say, we're going to maintain the current configuration. And then if you give me directions to open up this conversation, we go do that. But I just think it's so uncertain that I don't think it's a good idea to have this committee, because I mean, that's a year plus amount of work, meeting with the community and the rest. So that's why I'm recommending the current configuration for this.
So if you had your way, then you would have that configuration discussion first, and then meet as the committee for the buildings. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think the issue here is that we're going to have to move forward with planning, and if we want to have this conversation about configuration, we can start having that, but that's going to be a multi-year process. And
I don't think if that's what you want to, if that's what we want to do, the configuration discussion, I don't really think that it's going to affect the way this is laid out. I really don't. I think that, I mean, the way the buildings were put together, I think it's not going to change the discussion much.
Dave, I would like to see pre-kinder at Dilly Joseph Gale and Harvey Clark. I think that that's a really important, needed component. And that's what the parents are constantly saying to me, how come we don't have, pre-kinder? So I think that that's something that has to be discussed.
Sure. We're going to talk about pre-kinder in just a second. It's coming up next. Okay, are we good with this one? Little thumbs up.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I would like to see, and I know what you're talking about, more time in that, but when you look at the numbers of how many students we have and coming up and the projection, it would be interesting to see if we change the configuration at Tom McCall. Those are 2 elementary schools. I know that's a little bit of extra work, but I would like to see what that would look like to accommodate the population that we currently have.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I am saying is that there's no way that I can get that work done before we meet this long-range facility planning committee. There's no way that I can make that happen. And that's why I'm saying, for the purposes of the long-range facility planning, that they have to get going. If we want to have this grade configuration conversation, that is a mission that you could put me on. I'm not going to get to this long-range facility planning until next year, mid-year. I mean, we're going to push this off a long ways, and I don't think that's wise. I think
So
Brad's comment is a good one too.
How long is this long-range plan that you're putting into effect? Is it for 5 years, 10 years?
It usually steps out 5 or 10 years, but again, once you get it past about 3 or 4 years, it's highly I mean, even you can see just in the 3 years since we last had it, it's already diverged. We've already diverged from the plan.
The last time we looked at grade configuration in this district, especially the Tom McCall, Neil Armstrong discussion, we took at least 2 years. So I think if we're going to start talking about grade configuration, that we should probably allow at least 2 years of discussion with parents about making those kinds of changes. I don't know that it changes much. I'm looking at the buildings. I mean, if you're going to reconfigure grades and you also have a long-term, I mean, you have a plan for building a new building, it's probably not going to change the way you're building the new building. It's just going to make some changes in the boundary, which always creates some interesting challenges.
Right.
Well, I would say that you have 3 transitions here from what, 5-6 to 7-8 to 9-12. And I am interested in knowing what folks are thinking about Tom McCall and that grade configuration. Now, having said that, you know, if you can go ahead and do long-range facilities planning for buildings and have that conversation later, fine. But I'm kind of interested in the 5-6 model, whether that's the best.
Yeah, me too.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that it's time for a discussion. I just think that those are 2 different subjects. Yeah, I agree with that. The transitions are tough. So at least a discussion. I mean, there was a reason why years ago we went to this model, and it worked. But I think it's time for a discussion at some point.
I agree.
Okay. So what I heard was, you're okay with this as a moving it forward to long range facility plan, and then I hear people saying that they would like me to take a look at or structure a conversation around our configuration. That's a big haul. I'm saying it, so I don't mind it. I'm just trying to figure out where to have that and how to have that.
Dave, you can do it.
Okay.
Dave, this is Narce.
Hi, Narce.
Hi. So, you know, that configuration, eventually a conversation between the 5th and 6th grade, right? So when I was running for my seat, I had a lot of conversations with a lot of different people because I was trying to understand our system.
Yeah.
You know, the 5th and 6th, obviously 7th and 8th. So it was explained to me from different members of the community and you probably already all know this, but from what I understood, one of the sort of guiding principles for this move was to be able to try to eliminate the racial tensions between the kids happening, going from elementary schools into the feeder 7th and 8th grade, which was causing quite a bit of turmoil. And the idea was to put this 5th and 6th grade. But what I would hear from the older high school kids that had gone through had been in our district the whole time here, is that the the 7th, 8th, the 5th and 6th grade, the Tamakal, actually didn't really alleviate that. So it's perception. I don't know if it's true or not, so don't quote me on this. That by having, what is it, East and West buildings? Is that what they're, East and West? That actually ended up being where in one particular building you had all the Hispanic kids, and then in the other building mainly the majority of the white kids. So it didn't really create that synergy of what it was intended for. So I don't know if that's accurate or not. So I would be interested to get more information about that. Is it true that we have the majority of the brown kids in one building and then non-brown kids in the other building? And we don't have to answer that now. It's just what I heard while I was running for this position.
Darcy, at some point you can call me because I was involved with that planning and what the intent was. And then we collected data afterwards and really looked at, we had a large group of, well, you can call me and we can talk about that.
All right, I'll give you a buzz.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brad.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm going to touch back on the grade configuration. I mean, I'm going to give everybody a call here and we'll talk about what that looks like, and maybe you can give me a mission here. I just got to kind of get my head around timing. But for the purposes of long-range facility planning, does everybody kind of understand why I'm recommending that? And are we basically good with that? As long as I hear I need to have a conversation around grade configuration at some point with the community. Okay. Pre-K. So here's what we've got on a recommendation. So Kate was just talking about it. I'd like to put pre-K into every building. As a planning, what we basically said is we'd like to add 4 more pre-K classrooms. Currently, I'm thinking it would be Echo Shaw, Cornelius, Fernhill, and Joe Gale. But we're just picking 4 because I don't think it's feasible right now for us to say we can add 6 pre-K classrooms. But I do think it's feasible. I'm looking around, looking at the funding. This is all going to have to be funded. It's not general fund. We can utilize some SSA, but we've already got SSA pretty involved in some other places. So, but what I do think we could do is, what we're basically saying is we're going to add 4 more pre-K classrooms. We'd like to, as part of our plan, is continue to expand there. Now, the decision about exactly where it's going to go and the rest of that, that's still to be made. With the number here is that we want to continue to expand pre-K, and we would add 4.
So Dave, what do we have right
Hi,
now?
Dave. This is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I was just wanting to ask a quick question. Do we have the classroom space for that?
Yes.
At those buildings.
Well, that decision is going to have to wait and see. Currently, Echo Shaw is pretty close to capacity. So is Cornelius. Fernhill has space. Joe Gale has space. There's a lot of, again, this recommendation is really about, do we have the overall space, and trying to figure out where there are needs. So, yes.
And do you think there's needs for an extra class? So no, I know there is, but I mean, at Cornelius and Echo Shaw, there's already one. So you see that there's need for another one there, more so than at any of the schools in Forest Grove, Dilley or Harvey Clark.
Well, I think what I'm thinking here is that the Title I buildings are the places where we should definitely be pushing hard on pre-K. That's all I'm saying by this. Again, judging Dilley versus that, I don't want to get into that conversation. What I want to say is we need to continue to add pre-K classrooms, and there's 4 more here. I'm thinking we would go Title I, but those are all decisions that we'll make down the road.
Dave, I just want to, as a board member, I support pre-K at the Title I schools, because those are those are the schools that have a higher need. If we could put pre-K at all of our schools, like Kate was talking about, I would fully support that. But if you were going to have to make decisions about funding and how you're going to support that, those Title I schools would be my first choice.
Dave, how many pre-kinder classes do we currently have?
Currently, we have Cornelius, Echo Shaw, Fern Hill. So we have 3.
Okay.
We were working some halftime at Echo Shaw through some title money, but I'm not sure that that's still, because of all of the COVID, I'm not sure that's, and Angela just said nope. So yeah, I wanted Fern Hill, Cornelius, and Echo Shaw.
So what you're recommending, we have 3 and then we'll add 4 more, so we would have a total of 7.
I would love to do that. Again, that's going to depend upon us continuing to secure funding. We actually have more funding than just about anybody in the state, I think is what I learned from one of my last conversations. With our 3 classrooms, we're getting for our size, we're getting a big support from the pre-K promise dollars.
So I would agree with what Brad said. I think putting those, if you're going to do them in the higher needs locations, I agree with that.
Okay, I'm going to keep us moving because I'm already running out of time. We're good with this, though. People are basically okay. Increase pre-K, we think 4, but if I could do 6, I would do that easily. There is a capacity issue there, but okay. CTE. So I want to talk through in the last 2016-17 long-range facility plan, what the basic gist was. They recommended building a new building for CTE at the high school and then investing some amount of money in Taylor Way. And what we're going to be recommending for the CTE piece is that with Measure 98, we've already done good work in building the cabinet shop and redoing the welding shop. And we've got good investments there. So we're going to push to the long-range facility plan. We don't need a new CTE building for our high school. They have some programs, I've listed them here. The education pathway, we don't have a classroom that could be a pre-K classroom. We need to start connecting our students into the education program. We want to get them back as teachers. One of the ways we could do that is we have a pathway, we're ready to go, but we don't have a space to do the pre-K there. So building one of those spaces at the high school would be useful. Mechatronics is also a program that's growing for us. We're currently hosting it out of a science classroom, and culinary has 2 spaces. We've updated one of them. Again, if the long-range facility plan decides that there's money to be spent on this, we would recommend that they would update these sites and we would not do a new building. So our recommendation is basically just address the program needs at the high school, not a new building.
That sounds like it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I would support that too. I just, being a part of that committee last time, that was not there at that point. And I think that was the reason for that discussion about building something. It's a different ball game right now.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense. I do think a lot of the discussions that Kate and I have had about making sure that our alternative school has access to those programs is an important piece, but I would support that recommendation.
Okay, so let me go to the next one because I think that's, and then ALTED. Our recommendation here, in the last one, it was $4 million worth of improvements for Taylor Way. And what we're recommending is we build an alternative facility near the high school, somewhere between 150 and 250 students. I left a really wide, if we built it for 250, we could fill it with 250 with a 2,000 student high school. I don't know what the right numbers are here. What I do know is we currently serve somewhere between about 46 and 70. I think there's 76 kids in calc right now. So, and then the next one would be to build some sort of a classroom, some kind of facilities upgrade for NAM, so we could do some alternative education services there. Again, the committee will make a decision about what makes sense here, but that's kind of our recommendation, is to build a new site for calc and then run some sort of on-site alt piece at NAMS.
Dave, I would just question the numbers. 250 seems really, really high, especially for a high school our size. You've seen what the numbers have been over the last 10 years over there. I mean, if I can see 150, but 250 seems really high. That would be my only comment.
Sure.
And I would say maybe at NAMS, 15 on the low end would, 15 to 25, it might be too low there. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah, you know, I know you're talking generality, so, but yeah.
Yeah, I know it, when we built Springbrook in Newburgh,
Yeah.
We built it with 7 classrooms and they filled up every single one of them, and the program's really taken off.
Yeah.
And that's why I think there's I don't know what that right number is. I just know that we immediately, as soon as it was built, it was like we didn't build it large enough.
Yeah.
It could have used a couple more classrooms.
Right. And that was an alt program at Springbrook. Yeah, is that what you're saying?
Correct. It's an alt program. And again, it's interesting because it's basically 200 yards away from the high school.
Yeah.
It's right across the field. And so they have a similar kind of arrangement where the kids can still participate in CTE and PE and some other pieces.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're good with this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the number again, Dave,
Yeah.
I think the number 250 is too high. And I think if you build it for 250, they'll fill it up. We will fill it up with 250.
Yep.
So that's my only comment.
I could easily just take that whole second half off and just say 150, because that's really the number I think I'm more headed towards. So
I would be good with that.
okay. PE. So PE is a tough one because of in our last conversation, I know there are folks. Here's what we're saying. We've done some work and we've invited some folks, but trying to make the PE minutes work for us. I'm not saying that PE is not important. I'm not saying that we don't want to meet these requirements. As a matter of fact, I think Brad asked a question last time about, hey, these minutes are similar to what we used to do, and we did them with the same gyms that we have right now. That makes sense to me. The issue is really we had Troy and we had Angela kind of do some just initial scheduling of how to make some of this work if we were going to pull out for more minutes. And what we found was that in doing that, we're always taking away from some of the math block or the lit block. And so our recommendation here is basically maintain current facilities and kind of PE structure to utilize. We're going to have to get creative to meet this requirement, but we don't think building more gyms is probably the way in which we need to do this. I've received a couple of phone calls from PE folks who have kind of talked through some other ways of being creative. And so I think there's some ways for us to engage folks to figure out some more ways of doing this. So I just want to make sure I get this one correct. We're going to recommend that we kind of maintain the same current facilities, but we've got more work to do with our principals, with our teachers, to kind of find a way to be creative in getting these minutes without taking away from our lit blocks and our math blocks.
That sounds not that easy to do, Dave. I mean, you're gonna get more PE out of the number of minutes that you're in school now, without so good luck. I don't disagree with the recommendation. I think it's fine, but that's kind of a puzzle, I think.
Hey, Dave, is John here?
Yeah.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
So we had this discussion years ago. Not years ago, but a while back. Tell me exactly what, in terms of the requirements, what are we required?
So the state legislature has increased the minutes incrementally. So our current is 120, but since we're in COVID, this year should have been 180.
Right.
So, we can meet the 120. But what we were really challenged to do is the 180, really challenged, because we were pulling from math, literacy block, or language arts, or reducing every other day social studies or science. That's what our day looks like right now. And another district, neighboring district, when they're taking a look at it, trying to maintain costs. Okay, so what does that look like? Cutting music? No, that community can't do that. That's their pressure point. So that's the challenge that all of our districts in our county are looking at. How do we meet this increase in mandated PE minutes? And so we've been very creative, looking at movement during music class and movement in regular class, but that does not look like the traditional PE class.
You know who I am.
Yes, I do.
So you know where I come from.
Yep.
And I just think that there's more than just, there's got to be a way of what our current facilities are and what our current class structures are to make, not 100%, but there's got to be a middle ground. And
That's what we're looking. That's, if the local board tells us we need to do it, we need to do it. But there's a trade-off to that. So what does that look like? And that's what we're trying to bring to you.
So if we don't meet those requirements, then what?
Well, then we have to apply for a waiver for Division 22. We do know that at the middle school level, at several middle schools across the state, there's no way they can meet the 225. That's 45 minutes every single day. And so that's where they're saying no. So before that, pressure point, what can we do creatively? That's how we got to the 120. But, the 180 is challenging. And so that's why we pulled in two experienced principals, Angela and Troy, who brought to us sample master schedules. What does that look like during the day? So these are ongoing discussions, I think, with the long range facility plan as well as with the board.
So I would want to know, personally, I don't know what the rest of the board, we haven't had this discussion, but I would want to know what the rest of the districts are doing to meet this requirement. I guess the other, when we had this discussion before regarding facilities, I think we have enough facilities to meet the requirements. I think it has more to do with the FTE and the time and day. So what are the other school districts doing to meet this requirement? And then that would be something I would want to know.
Yeah, they're doing exactly what we're doing, Brad, for the most part.
So maybe the next board meeting, we can have a report on exactly what they're doing and who they are to kind of get an idea of what's going on.
So what I'd like to, totally agree, Brad. So my issue is, let us put together kind of a plan of how we can go about looking at this PE requirement. Like I said, I got a couple of, I got some teachers who contacted me. We've had, again, kind of some principals working through this. Let's talk about how we might figure this out. Again, everybody's having the same struggles right now, trying to figure out how to make this work. So let's sit down and do this right. I mean, I kind of got two things from you. Let me see if anybody else wants to talk about PE for this situation with the long range. We're not going to build more facilities with it. That's kind of the recommendation. Now, how we do end up meeting this, that's again another conversation for us to have.
Yeah, two different discussions. One's a facility and one's about practical application.
Yeah.
Are we good with that, the rest of our board?
Yeah.
See some nods, okay. So again, sounds like a couple of things here. Let me make sure I'm at the end of my show here because I'm running out of time. Okay, so here's what I heard. Size of the elementary, I'm going to get you back some more information. So we don't have a decision on that yet. Target class size, grade configuration, we're okay with this going forward to the thing, but you want me to, I'm going to come back to you and talk to you about how we're going to have a conversation as a community. This is like one of the things that you want me to open up and have a conversation about. Pre-K, we're okay with the recommendation to the long range facility. CTE and alt schools, we're okay with. PE, we're okay with this recommendation, but this is again something else that you'd like us to open up a conversation and find out how we might be able to do this better. Did I just summarize it correct? Okay. Yeah. The last little question here is that we need to try and see if we can, and we only have like 4 or 5 minutes, so we may need to push this to later, but I'm just trying to figure out, what do you think your highest priorities are? If we communicate these, because we're not going to be able to do all of this, but if you had your highest priorities, what would those be? And maybe I push this out unless we can figure it out pretty quickly.
Why don't we email you?
Okay.
I like that. Can we think about that, Dave, and then get back to you?
Yep, I'll try and push this out in an email to you, and then if you just take some time and then push us back your priorities, that way we can communicate that to the long range facility plan committee.
Okay. All right, that sounds good.
Wow, thank you. Good conversations.
Seriously, are you thanking us for that?
This wasn't easy.
No. And there's lots of important things here. I mean, again, we're talking about kind of these vision pieces. So I really do appreciate the conversation. And that's it. I think we have about 3 minutes till the formal board meeting starts, and off we go.
Okay, I'll close the work session at this time. We'll close at 6:26 p.m. and reconvene in a few minutes for the board meeting. Okay, everybody ready? Okay. Off we go. The November 23rd, 2020 Forest Grove School District Board of Directors meeting is called to order at 6:30 p.m. We'll do a roll call of board members present. Mark Everett, I'm Mark Everett, Board Chair. Kate Grandusky,
Present.
Brad Bafero,
I'm here.
Narce Rodriguez,
I am here.
Valerie Ingram.
Here.
Okay, thank you. School board will hear public comment for unscheduled public appearance received through the designated email address on the board page on the district website to be read by district staff at the appropriate time on the agenda. You may also provide a comment if you're registered for the Zoom meeting. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we could do introductions of staff at this time. Staff are at the meeting.
John O'Neill, Assistant Superintendent.
Kevin Rain, Director of Human Resources.
David Warner, Communications.
Kimberly Scherer, Director of Student Services.
Enrique Piñon, IT Manager.
Eileen Clute, Business.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is approval of tonight's agenda. And is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I move that we approve tonight's agenda as written.
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Narce Rodriguez,
Yes.
Kate Grandusky,
Yes.
Valerie Ingram,
Yes.
Brad Bafero,
Yes.
and Mark Everett, and I'm a yes. I think we'll go ahead and do our student representative report for this evening. It's a pleasure to introduce Miley Vernon, who will be here this evening with us. I believe Mr. Kirkman is also here this evening, the advisor, student body advisor. And so welcome, Miley, for being here this evening. And if you have a student representative report, you can go ahead and give that to us now.
Okay, thank you. So I'll first start with quarter one. Some positives that I've got back from friends and people, mostly 10th graders, was that they liked having 4 classes. Also that there was increased attendance and participation this year because of the cameras on. It's nice that it's broke up into quarters, and also no one has been suspended, which is really good. Grades have gone up, and then from what I've heard from staff, they do like Canvas way more than Google Classroom. Next, I'll start with some negatives. A lot of people, and it's like a lot of people have said this, is that it's very fast paced. So just all those classes at once. And we have talked about it, and having that Wednesday off is really helpful for a lot of students, because then they can get caught up on all their work and then have those extra, and then another 2 days. Also, this has been like a really big one, I guess you'd say. Passing time has been very like short, I guess you would say, for many people. because so many teachers go up to that like limit of 9:30, like for your first block at least 9:30, and then you have 5 minutes, which is not a lot. It seems like a lot, like it should be a lot, but it's not for all the oh my gosh, sorry guys, for all of the students. Okay, move on to ASB officers. We are meeting once every 2 weeks. Many ideas are not feasible in the current environment we're in right now. Sports, there's positives and negatives of that. Is that positive? We're getting exercise, and it's also making people happy to continue practicing. And obviously, in the state we're in right now with the 2-week pause and everything, we can't do that. But when we did start that little period, like when we had like tennis, track, soccer, all that stuff, it was really problematic for some students because like I live out in the country, and so it's a 15-minute drive for me to get in at least to the city, and we're starting at 3:30, and so my parents luckily will get off earlier so that they can take me there. But for some other students, they don't have that resource or ability to do that, so they're mostly always late. With sports, I guess you'd consider this esports. We started that up. We have 3 teams looking to expand during the spring. Rocket League is the only one going right now, and I'm pretty sure that they're in 60th place among all the other schools. For clubs, we did have our club rush, and it didn't go the best that we wanted it to, but it went pretty well. There's currently 11 active clubs, and most of them will meet in Zooms. So then present, the Q2 transition was pretty easy because most classes have stayed the same because they're year-longs, and only like a couple have changed because those are your electives. But other than that, it's been pretty good. ASB reorganization for CDL, we are currently in the process of doing that. We're having our team leaders begin to get people together and make sure everything and everybody knows that what we're doing. And then once we get back from Thanksgiving break and right in December, we're going to start everything up for ASB and hopefully make that a more constant meeting. And that's all I have for today.
That was a lot, and that was really, really good. So thank
Hey,
you.
that was excellent. You did a good job.
That was a great job. So very good information. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. I'll just ask, I think Mr. Kirkman's there. I don't know if there's anything to add, Mr. Kirkman, now or not, or if you were there assisting her.
So I just want to say that Miley will be our board representative for the rest of the school year. She's currently the Associated Student Body Secretary, and she will be serving in this role for the duration of the year. And also just keep your eye out for her because she does have aspirations to ascend to the Associated Student Body Presidency at some point during her tenure within the organization. So thanks for the invite today, and great job, Miley.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Miley. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Mr. Parker, I'll turn it over to you for a number of items on the agenda: calendar notes, recognition, superintendent report, and so on.
Perfect. So I want to start out with, we want to say congratulations to Foursquare High School students who received National Merit Scholarship recognition. Congratulations to Declan Lynch and Thomas Pignon, who were honored as National Merit Scholarship semifinalists, and to Ian Sebula and Elizabeth Laurer, who received letters of commendation. These are truly exceptional students. Every October, about 1.6 million juniors across the country take the PSAT. Those who score in the top 1% achieve the distinction of National Merit semifinalists. Semifinalists are the highest scoring program entrants in each state and represent the top 5.5% of the state's senior students. Commended students placed among the top 50,000 scorers of more than 1.5 million students who entered into the 2020 competition. So again, I just want to say congratulations to Thomas Pignon, Declan Lynch, and then to our semifinalists, Ian Sebula and Elizabeth Laurer. And you might recognize that one of those is Enrique's son. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the work that's been going on with behavioral health and wellness. We, as part of our SSA funds, we brought Cassie Kenny in to become our coordinator of behavioral health and wellness. And I just want to give you a little update. I'm going to invite her in January to present kind of more of the work that's going on. But they've been working in all the various tiers of support to improve our behavioral health and wellness systems. At tier 1, or the universal level, this work included planning for an aligned approach to social emotional learning for grades 5 through 8. So Tom McCall and NAMS, rolling out a universal screener for social emotional learning as part of our multi-tiered systems of support pilot. It was going to be all of Joseph Gale. They've now narrowed it into 3rd grade because of COVID. They're having problems with it. But we're starting this MTSS system at trying it out at Joe Gale. At tiers 2 and 3, it includes improving our ability to connect with families with culturally appropriate community mental health resources, as well as refining our suicide prevention and response efforts for our most at-risk students. ODE has actually contacted us to use the suicide prevention guide that our counselors and Cassie worked on as kind of a model, just to tell you a little bit about the work that's going on there. And again, I'm going to have Cassie come out and present in January, but kind of some of the other things that are going on here. Flight team. So they're updating the existing flight team methods for our virtual environment so that even if a crisis happens while we're in COVID, we can still get support out to our students. So they've done the other piece that I talked about, and then this updating of the flight team. And I'm really excited about the work that's happening here. I think it'll pay off for us down the road. So, and I'll have her come in January, and her team kind of present to us some more information about this behavioral health and wellness framework. And that's it for me. Well, for that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Parker before we move on? Okay. The next item on the agenda is a consent the consent item. So the consent agenda is made up of routine, non-controversial items to be voted on under one motion. Are there any items within the consent items a board member or the superintendent wishes to discuss separately? Hearing none. We'll do a roll call.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Now any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go on to the vote. So roll call vote. Mark Everett, yes. Kate Grandusky?
Yes.
Brad Bafaro?
Yes.
Valerie Ingram?
Yes.
And Narce Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. All right, presentations. We have 2 presentations this evening. The first one is the monthly financial report, and presenting this evening is Eileen Clute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight we have in the board packet a couple of new financial reports. Our Board Financial Oversight Committee met earlier this month, and in that quarterly meeting, part of the process was to review internal financial reports that we've been doing and we look at every month. And the board committee felt that it was important that the whole board as a whole seen it on a regular basis. And so these 2 reports, one you're familiar with, and the other one is more internal that we send out to all administrators every month. But they're good indicators of how we're doing and how much funds we have spent and where we are in the budget, as kind of an interim view in between those quarterly cash forecasts that we do. So I will share my screen. Okay. So in the board packet is 2 reports. One is the budget update, what's committed for spending this year as compared to what's in the budget appropriations. So every spring we have in our adopted budget max appropriations that we can spend by major fund and major function. And so this report just shows us a kind of a progress update on where we are year to date as compared to what we had adopted in that budget. In this, you can see in the far left column is the major fund and major function. So the top portion is your general fund, major functions, instruction, support services, transfers, and contingencies. That first column is going to be the adopted budget. And then the next column is the spend to date. So that is actual spend payments made as of the date of the report. So this is a update as of a point in time. This one was ran on November 5th. So it includes October's payroll in that column. The next column over is going to be the encumbrance. That's what we have committed to date, but we haven't spent. That's the payrolls through the rest of the year, open POs, things that we have in place that we have not actually spent yet. Then you have your total committed, which is the combination of the 2 prior columns, and your budget balance. It shows a good indicator of where we are, if we're coming up on our appropriation max spending limits. In that budget balance column, you really want to see everything as a positive and nothing getting close to 0. As soon as it starts getting close to 0, we want to have conversations about what next steps are. The one caveat on that is the enterprise and community all the way down at the bottom, that negative 76,000, that is the Viking house. Its financials and expenses are recorded a little differently. They're recorded at the time of sale. So in here you have that $558,000 of expenses year to date. That's the sale of last year's house. And so at June 30th, all of the current year's expenses will go into inventory until the current year's house is sold. So that one will look a little off throughout the year, but we'll really pay attention to it close to June and time that with the sale of the house. But otherwise, everything else along here looks really good in all of our major funds, major functions to date. Any questions on this report? Okay. The second report is, this is a summary report of a more detailed one that gets sent out every month to administrators, budget owners, and it really drills the general fund budget down to budget control groups. A few years ago, we started taking that budget and dividing it up into budget owners, being able to track it by this budget control group. We track it and monitor it to make sure that everything's staying in the positive. Again, this is at a point in time. It's not a forecast of projection for the rest of the year. If I go through just the top group, this one's mine, the business office. The business department, we have $815,000 budget. To date, we've spent $604,000. We have $28,000 encumbered, and our current budget balance is $183,000. So we've spent 77.5% of our budget this year to date. And so you can go down and you can see like all of the buildings. So Cornelia's, the curriculum department, Dilley, Echo Shaw, Fernhill, Harvey Clark, everybody has their own budget allocations. And then within that, if you're looking at the building specific, Cornelia's, Dilley, Echo Shaw, Fernhill, all of those on this page, each one has 3 different allocations. They have their building budget, their ELD budget, and then their site funds budget. And all of those are allocated during the budget process based on a number of students projected for the next year in that building. And so we watch it and track it throughout the year. Buildings and departments can overspend on one line and underspend on another, as long as overall they net positive. The caveat with the buildings is their ELD funds and their site funds can't go backwards. So if a building, say Cornelia, is overspent on their ELD funds, the overage would come out of their building budget. But if they overspent on their building budget, it cannot come out of their ELD budget. So it's only one directional on those building budgets. But all of the other departments, they can move around, fluctuate between one, as long as within that budget owner, it stays in the positive. So this just shows where we were as of November 2nd on the budget update. Each month, this gets sent out with all of the detailed reports behind it to all administrators, budget managers for the general fund. So we can kind of keep an eye and everybody can see and have that monthly view of where they are and what we're looking at. Going down.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
On the previous page, I just noticed that I think there was one that was 231% of the budget. And I guess maybe the answer to that is that you can overspend what you just said. You can overspend in one area, but you can't overspend in the whole, right? And so is that an
correct
explanation for that? Because when you see 231% of the budget, it's
correct. With that one, you're really looking at that curriculum total line.
Got it.
They have 88% spent. So that's really what I'm looking at, is that total line. Whether they, we all plan and budget based on scenarios and assumptions, and they change as the school year starts and, things happen. This year especially has been real challenging on, what we had projected on spending and where we're actually spending right now, which is all of the different changes. So overall, I think it's in a really good place right now.
So just to in each of these these three items that are in buildings. So just a general overview would be, as the year starts, you should have most of your funds still, they go down as the year goes on, right?
Correct.
And if you are in the fall and you're spending 80% of your budget, right? Then that's not good.
Well, it depends on how you manage the budget. So some budget administrators right out the gate, they'll put in POs for everything that they plan on spending for the year. And so that's already going to be in the expended or in the encumbrance column as projected to spend, whereas others will enter it as it happens. So yes and no. It really depends on the budget administrator. I like to look at trends. So where were you this time last year versus where are you this time this year? Especially if it's the same administrator, same building, same budget administrator, then you have that consistent view.
But if you see, if you see 231.13 in a budget and you have concerns, at least this kind of format would give you reason to ask the questions, Eileen, right?
Right. It gives us a heads up. It gives budget administrators a heads up of kind of where they are. Everybody really has access to view this stuff in Infinite Visions at any point in time. Still working on getting everybody up to date on how to view that. But we do have, different methods of seeing this. Some people just like to see it every month as it gets sent out. Some people manage it in their own way. But this just gives us a view to see and just to kind of watch it and make sure that, if somebody needs help, that we can grab that ahead of time before we get too far.
Okay. Yeah.
And then again, these are just at a point in time. I'll update the summary at the start of every month, and both of these reports will be in the board packet under information. monthly going forward, based on the recommendation from the Financial Oversight Committee. Yeah. Any other questions you have for me?
I don't have a question. I just think that this is awesome in terms of being able to see this. Especially it gives you a clear picture on where we are financially at different buildings. And I think that one of the things that it does, it really gives us perspective on where we are in a point in time. So yeah, it looks good.
I agree, and it's been nice. I mean, we had our first meeting with Eileen and Brad and I, and it was a good meeting, and it's good. I think Kate, you sat on this last year with Brad, and so it is nice to meet, and it's nice to talk about this. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you for putting it in the packet. It's very informative.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Mark,
Yes.
we missed unscheduled public appearance and
Oh,
we have one comment. Could we
Okay.
do that real quick?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
I zoomed right past that. Okay, all right. Okay, so we'll take a break. We'll come back for our second presentation here and go back up to unscheduled public appearance. So the board appreciates community members sharing information during public comments. Public criticism or complaints about school district personnel is not allowed at this time. Are there any comments that have been received?
Yes, we have one that was sent through email.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and read that. It's a little bit lengthy, so just bear with me.
Okay.
This is from Antonio Marquez, who's a physical education teacher at Echo Shaw Elementary. It says, to whom it may concern, I would like to submit the following as public comment in regards to the October 26, 2024 Grove School District Board meeting. My comments pertain to the discussion about ORS 329.496, which outlines physical education minute requirements. First of all, I would like to share that I am deeply saddened and hurt by the way Mr. Parker framed the discussion of increasing PE minutes. Although many members of the board mentioned caring about and valuing PE, the lack of importance placed on making progress towards increasing PE minutes shows that the board does not actually believe in or know about the extensive research that demonstrates the value of physical education. As the FGSD board, your leadership sets an example for the rest of the district, and unfortunately, I feel that the board is not setting a positive example in regards to prioritizing physical education and health and wellness. I am aware that the board always has to debate what content will ultimately receive priority in both planning and financial support. However, I don't understand why physical education continues to be the quote unquote can that always gets kicked down the road. When speaking to colleagues across the country, I constantly hear that physical education is something that districts care about and think is important, but they don't have the resources to focus on it. FGSD will have the resources to create change, and if we truly care about students' health and wellness, we can choose to make this a priority. According to the legislature, SSA funds can be used to support several areas, two of which are well-rounded education and health and safety. Increasing physical education minutes for our students clearly falls into these two areas. If we care deeply at FGSD, we need to do better for our students when it comes to physical education. It is common knowledge that the participation in physical activity is directly related to higher academic achievement, decreased behavioral incidents, and increased attention span. Even more important than these benefits are the health and wellness benefits associated with daily participation in physical activity. Several meta-analysis, including tens of thousands of students, show this effect. A meta-analysis from the official Journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics examined data from 26 studies, including more than 10,000 elementary age children, that focused on assessing the effect of physical activity on academic achievement and classroom behaviors. According to the results from this meta-analysis, physical activity, especially physical education, improves classroom behaviors and benefits several aspects of academic achievement, especially mathematics-related skills, reading, and composite scores in youth. In a similar meta-analysis from the Journal of Science and Medicine and Sport, researchers performed a systematic review of 31 studies spanning from 2000 to 2017. The conclusion from this meta-analysis was that positive effects were found for physical activity on executive functions, attention, and academic performance in pre-adolescent children. Largest effects are expected for interventions that aim for continuous regular physical activity over several weeks. Finally, a meta-analysis published in Research Quarterly for Exercise and Sport looked through data from 59 studies that spanned from 1947 to 2009 and focused on the relationship between elementary age children's physical activity and academic achievement. The results from this study indicated that there was a significant and positive effect of physical activity on children's achievement and cognitive outcomes, with aerobic exercise having the greatest effect. The research is irrefutable. Schools have much to gain from increasing the minutes that students participate in high quality physical education, and a few movement breaks in their classrooms may be helpful, but is not enough. It sounds like the consensus from the board was to dismiss further efforts to expand PE, and unfortunately, there are always competing priorities that are identified as more important than PE. Districts that choose to use this as an excuse never actually make any meaningful change to their institutions in regards to increasing the minutes of PE offered, and therefore the students miss out on the benefits of physical activity. I propose we trust the research and let it guide where the money is allocated. My proposal is that FGSD use a portion of these funds to create a district level PE team that is responsible for looking at how FGSD can meet the requirements of ORS 329.496 and presenting that information to the board. That would include evaluating what is required in each building in terms of facilities and FTE. These will be the two largest barriers to getting our district compliant with this policy. However, even more important than being compliant with a policy, this will be the first step toward helping our students developing lifelong skills and habits that will directly impact their health and wellness and improve their academic achievement. Thank you for your time. Antonia Marquez.
Thank you.
Can I comment?
Yeah.
I think he makes some good points, and I think that forming a team to look at this instead of principals who are looking at schedules and a curriculum director who's looking at how to comply, I think it's a good idea. I know that just based on my background, I understand that there'll be some questions, but I think that it might be a good idea to have people who understand the content and curriculum to sit down and start to discuss what the students' needs are and have discussions about with the stakeholders about how we can make this work. A lot of the references that he made sense. Some of them were, I think they're worth at least looking at, but I do think it's probably a pretty good idea to look at how we can form a group like that and then come up with some ideas.
So I talked with Tony this afternoon, and that's exactly, he just wants to be part of the solution. So I had a good conversation, but that's exactly kind of where he's coming from, is he wants to be, he has some experience in Chicago schools doing something real similar to this. And so when my conversation with him was very, very much about how can I help be part of a solution.
I do love his passion, and I think that I think that in terms of being part of the solution, I think he's moving in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
So before we move on, though, I think, so you kind of gave me one big thing of grade configuration. We need to have a community conversation. Is this something the board would like me to open up? I've heard kind of Brad, but if I could just get some basic consensus here, then I can start putting some plans into place. But I'm just kind of curious where the rest of the board is.
I think it's a
I
good
agree.
idea. Yeah, I agree.
I support that too, Dave. I think including the community would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so too. I guess I don't know. I don't feel like I know enough about the PE minutes and how we might propose to meet those minutes and what activities we would be doing. I know John spoke a little bit about them, but I don't feel like I have a clear picture on what's required and what our plan is to get there. You know, I think that the comments this evening were really good from this gentleman, and I think that being a part of the solution in terms of getting together with other PE teachers isn't a bad idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree
will-
too, that you should definitely include the PE teachers. It doesn't quite seem right that a committee would not involve them when it pertains to their subject.
Agreed. Again, putting together this, trying to understand the long range facility plan, we haven't yet actually put together a committee to understand this. So that's what I think that's what you're giving me right now, is to go do this.
Okay, any other comments before we move on? Okay. Let's see, we're now on to still in presentations, and our second presentation is Superintendent Goal Progress from Mr. Parker.
Perfect. Let me, so I think we approved these about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Maybe it was a month ago. Time's moving quickly, but kind of want to run through just where I'm at. I kind of promised to give you kind of quarterly updates on kind of where we're at with my superintendent goals. The first 3 goals that we basically is develop and implement plans moving the district from comprehensive distance learning to a hybrid model, and then hopefully returning kids back to school in person. That's goal number 1. Number 2 was update and implement the strategic plan. Since we did the strategic plan, things have changed. It needs to get evolved. And then last is enact systemic change for our historically marginalized students. So those were the 3 goals that we agreed upon. The first goal, I kind of wanted to just give you a little run through on where we're at with it. Convene a team to finalize the hybrid planning. So we convened the team. I'm going to present to you in just a couple of minutes here, kind of the first part of that, which is a transition timeline. Create a plan that outlines the metrics for and timing for transitioning to hybrid. So I've got a recommendation for the transition. There's still lots of things for us to figure out here, though. Still many pieces. What this instructional model is actually going to look like is one of the first things that we're working on. We've got teachers who are kind of trying, maybe it's not like piloting because there aren't kids in school, but they're out kind of testing how this may play out in the classroom. I guess you'd call it a, well, that word's not coming to me right now, but we're trying out this model in classrooms right now to get feedback from teachers about whether or not it's going to work. We still have to finalize we have teachers in the building. We have public health guidelines that we're following. But when we begin to move kids back into the building, those guidelines need to be, they're bigger. There's more things that we need to worry about. Yeah.
We have kids. Do we have kids in the building?
No, we don't have any kids in the building right now.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
I didn't follow that. Sorry.
Yep. No. So what I'm going to give you tonight, the first part of this goal is I'm going to get you a timeline, but we still have tons of things. So this plan of how to get to hybrid is still not quite there. We got to communicate this hybrid transition plan to the staff and the community. We're going to do part of that tonight, but then the rest of this about what it's going to look like and what the public health guidelines, we haven't really given our parents a good picture of what it's going to be like in school yet. And we're still developing those. developing measures for evaluating the progress, and then communicating that progress on CDL. So I'm going to have, in my goals, we laid out some metrics of how we're going to measure success. On December 14th, we're going to present some of those to you. So we'll be able to present at least our initial, some of our initial testing and some of that about how kids are doing. So that'll be coming up. And then the last three on this first goal were kind of getting us to in-person. I haven't started on these parts of this goal. So I've got work going on in this first goal for the first like 3/4 of it. I'm going to move into that next goal. If you have questions, kind of where we're at, I just want to make sure you have a chance if you need to. The second goal I haven't started on yet, which is this is the review and evolve the strategic planning work we already completed, present evolved strategic plan draft to the board, get some comments, assign leaders to the various strategies, and then report back in 12-week interviews. So none of this work is started yet. Pretty much my time has all been spent on this hybrid process. So the second goal is yet to make any progress on. And I think, again, in my own mind, we're so busy trying to get the hybrid, I'm not sure how the strategic plan plays out right now. So for me to begin this work in the second half of the year and get it ready for us to enter in the next year makes more sense to me right now.
So I'm wondering if we can just call it the way it is.
Yeah.
Just maybe, Dave, just put this goal on hold for next year and say, in terms of, remember what we talked about before, prioritizing what's first on the list. This might be one that we put on the hold.
Yep. And then this last goal was this enact systemic change for our historically marginalized students. And I had a couple of action steps on it. This first one was ensure all educators have an understanding of the role we play in systemic racism or systemic injustice, because I think we have multiple groups that we're not serving. And part of it is definitely there's a racial component to it, but there's other components to it too. The district equity team has now met 3 times. We met about a week ago, the last time. School equity teams, which come to the district equity, they're continuing to meet monthly with their staff. I presented to the district equity team data around kind of our unchanging performance since about 2003 to about 2020. We're not really seeing our gaps move much. I'm happy to actually bring that to the board because I don't think I've presented that to you, but we did kind of pull some analysis over the last 17 years. And then our school equity teams are continuing to present to their staffs this issue around systemic injustice. So that's this first goal. We've had quite a bit of work on this, and I feel good about where we're headed with that.
So, question?
Yep, please.
So when will you present that, Dave?
When do you want it? Do you want it January? I mean, I have the data right now.
Yeah, just an update would be helpful.
Yep.
Dave?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. As I was sharing with you, I think last week via a text message and also a quick phone call, just wanted to share with the team, the rest of my board peers. I participated the Oregon State Board Caucus of Color. So this is a question that came up. There was probably about 30 of us that attended. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. So the question of the equity statement came up. So I appreciate, Dave, you looking into it.
Absolutely. District, and I'm going to come back to that because that's I want to make sure everybody knows what's going on there. The next one is district equity teams expand the knowledge of identity, safety, interpretive power, and how the culture cycle can be leveraged for systemic change. So this is happening at every school every month. Different teams are further ahead and different teams are still plotting, but everybody's moving on this. One of the district committees is a kind of a policy and board outreach. And one of the things that we're working on is basically to bring to the board an equity policy that will have an equity stance, and it'll start to lay out what we believe. There are many other districts around us. We're looking at North Clackamas, Hillsborough, Newburgh, Beaverton, Tigard Tualatin as kind of examples of this. But you'll see coming out in the next couple of months kind of this initial draft for conversation and such. So that work is moving ahead. Behavioral in the same Enact systemic change. One of the big ones is really around, are we meeting the needs of our students? Create a behavioral health and wellness framework that supports every student. We're making great progress on this. Again, I'll have Cassie come in and present on this in January, but I feel really good about kind of what, there's a lot of work being done here. And when we actually get back into school, I think you're going to see some big differences in kind of our outreach to kids. This last one, convene a team to begin to look at this systemic underperformance and begin to look at what do we need to do differently? How do we need to change our system to begin to impact this? I haven't started this work. This is something that we'll need to bring up as we start getting into the budget cycle. And that's where I'm at on my goals right now. I'll bring the data out on December 14th. And now that I think about it, Brad, maybe I should focus that data on the that I presented to the equity. I'll do it on that same night as we're presenting the test data on too. So it's all together.
I think that makes sense.
Yep. And that's kind of where I'm at.
So Dave, I would only
Questions?
ask, yeah, I would just ask the question, how do you feel about the progress that we've made based on all the things that are going on? Progress that you have made?
So I got a chance to get out into a middle school classroom and observe a class going on. I'm kind of setting up observations now throughout all 10 schools over the next like 3 weeks to get out and see some more classrooms. Things are, I know we say the same thing every time, but things are really challenging for folks. And our movement as far as our academics, I think Miley talked a little bit about it earlier tonight, which is things to the students feel really fast paced because things are coming at them. And at the high school, they're doing a whole year and half a year. So things are coming at them very quickly. But it's also, we can't move as quickly. The teachers it's like moving through the material is much, much harder right now. So things aren't going as quickly. You're going to see in some of our testing data, there's some good changes that happened last year before we went out on COVID. There were some things that we were working on in various schools. And then you're going to see that there's some holes that are being created by COVID. And so all in all, I feel good about where we're at considering where we've been through. And when I get out to see a teacher teach, I'm just amazed. I was amazed at the teacher's energy, the kids' energy, going through this lesson the way it was there. I mean, I felt really good about that. Even in these tough times, people are really making this about as good as it could be. So
that's good.
Is that what you meant? Or you want more personal from me?
I guess for me, it's who are we leaving behind? And are we really looking for those kids that we're leaving behind? I just watched the news tonight about, I don't know what district was, about the kids that are being left behind. And I'm just wondering if we're leaving kids behind at this point, just because of what's going on.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of multiple answers to that. One is that we're almost, there's no way that we cannot be leaving some kids behind with this. What's interesting is we're seeing that some kids who weren't doing well in school are now doing better in this model. And then we have other sets of kids who are still being disadvantaged by this model. I think it's pretty clearly our being able to serve our students who have challenges already, whether that's ELL, whether that's students, our student services folks, I think there's most definitely, we're leaving some kids behind in those areas. I will say that schools are doing I think our attendance is still very high. John will present that on the 14th. We'll bring in that attendance data. I'm kind of surprised by it. I would have expected that there was, we might have been lower right now than we are. But no, I think absolutely we're going to have to think about as we move into next year and we get back in person, like how we're going to deal with trying to get kids caught up. And I don't know what caught up means because I don't think that's like more school time, but I wonder if there isn't some different ways that we need to deal with that. Like, are we really going to start, let's say you ended the 3rd grade, are we going to start right at the beginning of the 4th grade? We're going to do some kind of overlap to make sure that kids have the set of skills. I don't know. Those are all big questions.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
We roll into the next one, which is the action item for this evening, which is a return to in-person timeline. Again, Mr. Parker.
I need to do a better job of assigning tasks. I wanted tonight to present to you kind of, yeah, kind of a return to in-person timeline. And I'm gonna kind of walk through the initial conversations that we had with this. We convened kind of 2 meetings. We had administrators, some union representatives, we had contractors from Sodexo, Midco, we had parents from each school. And the whole conversation was we just needed to kind of get this transition timeline nailed down. Other school districts have already committed to it, but the world changes really quickly right now. So I can tell you that even the folks who made several weeks ago made a statement of we're going to start on February 1, everybody's having to redo their plans. So what we came up with was kind of, I think, a pretty flexible plan that doesn't have a lot of details, but that's just so it allows us to be flexible in how we apply this. Our priorities here, we want to get kids back in school and we want to be able to do it safely as soon as the public metrics allow. But really, for me as the superintendent and you as the school board, we need to get kids back in school. Now we have to wait till it's safe to do that, but that's got to be one of our priorities. Bringing back our most vulnerable students first, as determined by staff. That's another one that we've got to prioritize equity here, which is we need to make sure the kids that we're leaving behind get in here first. We got to focus on student safety and wellness. There's social emotional supports that we need to be able to make sure the kids are getting. And we've got to do this health and safety protocols with fidelity. We need to make sure we keep people safe. So those were our priorities going into this. This is the set of metrics that the governor announced not too long ago. And again, you've got kind of, they broke it down into now kind of this on-site or green, the yellow where we're transitioning from kind of CDL back towards a more in-person. You got this transition, the yellow, orange, and then above 200, it's like you need in CDL. Again, I explained last board meeting that these metrics have changed slightly, that they're now, it's a 2-week measure of the number of cases per 100,000. This is our graph of recent. And what you'll notice here is that since, October, we've basically just been increasing. I just looked today, our new number here is 313. So again, we're way past our red zone here and we continue to head in exactly the wrong direction. So here's the board recommendations that we're looking for. That we use kind of and I'm going to explain what this 5-week model looks like here, but what we're going to ask eventually here is that we use a five-week model to transition from CDL to in-person instruction when the time comes. Right now, we're basically 8 weeks from today. We're basically 8 weeks from February 1. I met with Washington County Health this morning, and what I can tell you is that we're at least 3 weeks from being anywhere near even headed back towards more safe numbers. So what that really means is that even where we're at right now, we're probably Feb 1 would be like the earliest date that we could actually maybe start to transition into. If the numbers were okay, we might be able to transition back. So what I'm recommending is basically we say, we're gonna start planning to start on February 1 if the numbers are there. And then after February 1, we would use this kind of 5-week transition to make a move from CDL towards some sort of in-person. And again, this is all dependent upon whether or not this county and the state can get the virus under control. We're completely on the wrong end of this right now. So at this point, I don't see this happening in the near future. Here's kind of what the 5-week transition would be. When we notice the numbers are starting to come into a place where we're saying, hey, it would be solidly in the yellow, headed towards the green. We basically start to refine the transition plan. We communicate, we've got to work with local Washington County Health. They have to look at our plans and they have to sign off on what we're planning on doing as far as kind of the screening before kids come in and how are we going to move kids in the building and how are we going to keep teachers safe. Week 2, we continue to train all of our employees. So we're still 4 weeks out from actually doing anything. We train all of our employees around safety protocols. I know that right now we actually have to train all of our employees before sometime in December. So this will be more training going on. We'll communicate with staff in the community about the progress of the transition in this week 2. Week 3, we communicate out transportation plan schedules to what's the, how are the buses going to pick up, who's on what buses, what are the current regulations. Currently, we're like, kids have to be, who aren't in the same family bubble, have to be more than 3 feet apart from each other. There's all those things that we have to and then sometime in week 4, we need to buy some days, some number of days for staff to get back into their classrooms, get it set up and get it ready for kids. I don't know exactly when that looks like. Most of the other districts around us have already kind of agreed. We can't pick those days right now because we don't know when they're going to be, but sometime in week 4, we do need teachers to not have kids and get themselves moved back into their classrooms. And then week 5, we begin to run kids. We start bringing kids in, probably a soft start. Some of the other districts are looking at doing like K1, K2 in this early part of the transition, and they bring in the older kids later. Some of them are doing it over a week or 2. Some of them are doing it over like, they do 2 weeks and they bring in the next set, the next 2, something to that extent. But we would work out a schedule for that. So that's why I'm kind of recommending this 5-week transition kind of time. Transition week, there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be done, which is we actually got to work out the entry, exit, screening procedures. We got recess and lunch protocols, cleaning and sanitations, health and safety guidelines. We got emergency drills that we'll need to run. So that 4th week where we need some time where teachers aren't with kids, there's a whole bunch of training that's going to need to happen there. And then there's a bunch of teaching and learning things that we got to talk about, which is, again, we're still working on what this exact instructional model is going to look like. Curriculum planning, whole bunch of stuff. But that's kind of what I'm looking for, is kind of an agreement around, we put Feb 1 as kind of the starting date that we can look at it. And then from there, when we finally meet the metrics, we'll use this kind of 5-week transition time to get us back to school. I would like to get kids in school this year if we can meet the metrics. I don't really want to go to the end of the school year without coming back. I think it will do some very good for us to get kids in, get something rolling on a pattern before we start again in the fall. The issue there may be the virus may not let us. That may be the piece.
So Dave, the question I would have is, how are you sharing this? Is your plan to share this with the community, or
Yeah.
is this internal?
No, we want to communicate this. I mean, we haven't spent a whole lot of time like other districts have. Beaverton set like mid-November is their first date, and then they set February. We haven't done that, but I do want to start giving parents an indication of what our plans are. Things keep changing on us, so as soon as you announce a date, then things change, and we're reacting again. Except now it feels like we need to start figuring out how we're going to get kids back into school, and by setting a date and then the transition, because of it's dubious right now if we're going to be by Feb 1 if we would be back in the metrics.
I do think it's important that we share this with the community. Maybe it's not at this extent, but at some kind of level, so that they have an understanding what the plan's going to be coming back from Christmas. And even if things don't get better, at least they'll know why we're not coming back for in-person education. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I want to share the date and the transition pace first, and then we're going to need to share what it's going to look like in the classroom. Well, like I said, we've got a number of teachers who are kind of simulating this, and we want to get some feedback from them about how it's going, and then we'll kind of communicate out what that looks like.
Dave, I have one comment. One of the private schools, their kids are back in school, and the teacher came down with COVID, and they told the parents that they could either send their kids to school or not. And then they had to get a substitute teacher, and the substitute teacher didn't know how to do the technology for those kids that decided not to come back to school because the teacher had COVID. So I think that you're going to have to run some scenarios that you could open up school, and a teacher could come down with COVID, and what do we do?
Absolutely. So all of the working conditions, I still have to negotiate with our unions, and we're working very closely with our teachers. So I'm not suggesting that we bring our kids back before it's safe for our kids and our teachers. I'm saying we've got to work together, but it is a priority of mine to get these kids back in school at some point this year. And this issue of subs is a really big one across the state. And we've done some work trying to get folks trained up with our Canvas so that they can come into these spaces and still be productive. But that's a big challenge. Oh my goodness.
Well, I'm sorry to bring it up, but I just think that, running some of these scenarios that we would be prepared. And I know everybody's working real hard on it. Thank you.
So Dave, I was on the committee that worked on this, and the 5 weeks, I support the 5 weeks. I know in our last meeting, it's a lot to do in 5 weeks. And so I think that's enough time, but that's going to be a very, very busy 5 weeks once it looks like we've got to go to, plan for in-person instruction. And I know that, in the last meeting we were at, all of us, and it was 40 some people on this committee. I know that we you know, and you alluded to it, maybe a phase in of kids when you actually bring them into the building in some way in that 5th week that maybe spills over into that 6th week, you know, a little bit of latitude there. But it's a lot to do in 5 weeks, but I think that's a good plan.
So I should also tell you that some of our departments will be working ahead of the game, because like transportation will not be able to manage this 5-week schedule. They're going to need to actually do closer to an 8-week schedule because they've got to do the hiring. So as we see the numbers start to head towards the zone we're looking for, some of these departments are going to have to fire up and start preparing even before that 5-week transition, just because there's too much work to be done.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
And
questions? Okay.
And so I'm going to move forward with this basic plan, and as long as you all kind of don't see huge problems with it, we're going to have to, again, the biggest issue right now is we just got to get these metrics. We got to get this virus under control so we can begin to do some of this.
Right.
Dave, this was an action item. Do you need a motion from the board?
I do. I just saw it in the presentation, so I wasn't sure if we got it in the wrong space or not, but I would love a basic Feb 1, and then we use a 5-week transition from that point on.
Okay.
I will move that we adopt this plan for moving forward as written, as we for the future.
I second Narce.
Okay, thanks, Narce. So it's been moved and it's been seconded. Any discussion before we vote? Okay. So Narce?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So that passes. Thanks very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to our last section here this evening, Oregon School Boards Association elections. So for this, this is an opportunity for the board to discuss the items Oregon School Boards Association is asking member districts to vote on. So in your packet, you have the Oregon School Boards Association information. It is the Oregon School Boards Association is organized as one general state association with up to 3 elected representatives established across 14 geographic regions to support member participation and representation. Member boards also elect the Legislative Policy Committee and vote on the OSBA legislative policies and priorities. This year, the election window is November 16th to December 18th. We will be voting on the OSBA board representative for position 15 and the resolution for the proposed 2020-2022 legislative priorities and principles. Attached, you will find the candidate and resolution information for review. So in the packet, there's one candidate, Leanne Larson, for position number 15. And you can take a look at her application for that position in your board packet and review that prior to the next meeting. And then also in your packet is the resolution to adopt the OSBA 2021-22 legislative priorities and principles. So that's also in your packet. And it is, there was, you know, I sit on the Legislative Policy Committee, and I think it was just prior to COVID, I think it was maybe February, we met in Salem to talk about the priorities and principles for this time period. And we had a lot of good discussion about that. And I would encourage you to take a look at what is being proposed for the next time period. This is what the OSBA legislators folks who worked with the legislature will use as their sort of playbook for advocating for things for schools. And so again, this is something that we will be an action item at the December 14th board meeting. So that's in your packet. The other, any questions about that? Okay. The other item that's in the packet is, or for the next meeting, policy ACB, all students belong, ACB AR, bias incident complaint procedures. And this is a first reading. That's in the packet also for board action at our next meeting. I took a look at it earlier this evening, Mr. Parker. I don't know if you have anything to add to that this evening.
Just a couple of things. So we're bringing you those, the policy and the AR. This was a State Board of Ed passed the All Students Belong initiative sometime, it was September 18th, 2020. And they've got that every school district needs to pass a policy on or before January 1st, 2021. For us, we already had in our gang our policy around secret societies. We prohibited hate symbols of the swastika and the Confederate flag. So this was already in our policy. This isn't new to us. This policy broadens it. It basically prohibits hate symbols, of which it calls out 3, swastika, noose, and the Confederate flag. It opens the door for us to be able to, again, the next hate symbol that comes up, we will be able to prohibit it from our school district too. I think that the part that the AR, I think is, I mean, the initial policy is great. I don't really have any, it goes a little deeper than where we had been with our policy around secret societies. But the AR, I think, is really the part that I'm most interested in. And it basically gives us, it highlights a procedure for incidents of bias. We already had a harassment procedure and a staff complaint kind of procedure. This, we took this AR and we lined up the procedures and the timelines to agree with our other procedures. But I just like having it a separate set of procedures for folks who feel that they have been discriminated against, or there's a situation of bias, have a way, and we have now a procedure and a way that we're going to respond to those pieces. I think that's actually really important. And so we're bringing those to you tonight, and we would recommend that the board supports both the policy and the AR.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, questions.
I just have a comment, and I already talked to you about it, Dave, but that usage of our building with somebody that would support this kind of racism. I guess when we discussed it, you said that you would be able to, with the application, determine whether it was appropriate or not. But for example, if I'm not going to give any groups, but if it was a group that was a racist group wanting to use our facilities, how would we address that?
So I looked this up in the facilities policy today, and basically what it says is that groups that utilize our facilities have to follow our policies. So again, we don't get an opportunity to make a determination about which groups can or cannot use public property. But what we can do is if folks that do use our property have to follow our policies, of which this is now one of them. So this would be that would be the mechanism that we would work with groups using our properties to make sure that they're following our policies and procedures.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, both of those items will be on the action items at our next meeting in December. And with that, we've come to the last item, which is future board items or board discussion. This is an opportunity for the board to provide input for future board items and discuss a report on any committee meetings they've attended. So that's open to anybody who has comments.
Just a quick comment, just to review that, Dave, then John will get back to us on the minutes for PE, and then we'll hear back from where we are on the discussion with that planning committee next meeting.
Yes, let me put together a plan. I mean, I'd like to say yes, but why don't I get you a plan of how we're going to accomplish those things?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. With that, the board meeting will be adjourned. It looks like it is 7:45 p.m. and we are adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody.
See ya.
Good night.
Night.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep. Good night.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
Thanks, you too.
Good night.
Good night.